All right.
Dr. Niyi?
Okay. Good morning. My name is Dr. Osamiluyi. Background medical doctor. But I focus more on leveraging technology right now to increase access to quality care. That's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. Part of our work, we built a network of doctors, online physician network. It's the largest in Africa, doctors across Africa. It's called DocuLink. And it's interesting that since we built the online platform, a lot of doctors now approach us to support them in their offline activities, events and things like that. So part of the things I'm really passionate about is leveraging this our network to support healthcare in Africa, and also to see how we can connect people that want to invest in Africa in healthcare, connect them to Africa, and also Nigerians in diaspora that are looking to connect and support doctors back home to see how we can help and facilitate that interaction. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. So first of all, let me talk about an interesting thing that is happening in healthcare across Africa before I talk about the challenges and opportunities. First of all, it's a realization about the importance of healthcare, especially within the government, the importance of healthcare contributing to economic and human development. I think across Africa, there's a realization that good healthcare, quality healthcare, can contribute to economic development and to achieving the sustainable development goals. I think that's the first thing. So realizing this, governments now realize it is important to invest in healthcare. However, there's a small challenge. Governments realize, they found out they don't have enough of this capital or enough of these resources. For example, 2001, there was the Abuja declaration that African governments should invest 15% of their budget in healthcare. The last couple of years, Nigeria, 3 to 5% has been invested in healthcare. So the interesting thing is that governments realize, first of all, they don't have enough resources, and donor funding it's been realized that donor funding is unpredictable and is dwindling. So the interesting thing is that private sector involvement. Government now realizes that private sector is important to leverage the capacity, the capability, and the capital of the private sector to move healthcare forward. Talking about challenges of healthcare in Africa. So Africa is home to 25% of the disease burden of the world. Unfortunately, 3% of in terms of healthcare professionals, stay or work in Africa. So you have 25% disease burden, and you have 3% healthcare resources. And in terms of finance, only 1% of healthcare spending occurs in Africa. So when you look at this in terms of disease burden, in terms of finance, in terms of human capital, these are key challenges that we're hoping the private sector will be able to support and will be able to bridge. In fact, the financing gap in a report was released by UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, in February this year, that put the financing gap in Africa at $66 billion. So we're hoping private sector players there, and I'll talk later about this, some of these gaps in terms of actual things that money can go into in Africa. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Niyi.
Yeah, so I want to further highlight on the opportunities. So pretty much, if anybody listens to this and maybe has a couple of million access, not directly, maybe access to a couple of $1 million, I want you to just think, I need to put this into healthcare in Africa. That's what I want to hopefully achieve, to see how we can mobilize capital to healthcare in Africa. So in terms of opportunities, doing a little bit of deeper dive, it's estimated that 2030, the opportunity will be up to $259 billion in terms of the opportunity in healthcare, potentially creating 16 million jobs. And again, when you look at percentages, about 14% of the healthcare opportunity across the world will be in Africa. So there's so much to be done in Africa in terms of healthcare. And when we talk about the areas that these investments can go to, medical equipment, medical laboratory, pharmaceutical, a lot of pharmaceutical, the drugs in Africa, they come from India, they come from China. So there's so much opportunity in setting up these manufacturing plants in Africa. And in fact, we all know about the population growth in Africa by 2050. So the market is there. So all I can say, encourage everyone here with access to capital. Africa is ready for business, especially, and the governments now see the very important role of the private sector. In Nigeria, when I was growing up, and anybody that grew up in Nigeria would realize previously it was free healthcare for everybody, free healthcare for... But the government now realizes there's nothing like free healthcare. Somebody has to pay for healthcare. So there are different kinds of reforms in healthcare right now. We've had the National Health Insurance Scheme for some time. Now we're having the state-based health insurance scheme, and this requires private sector support in terms of capital, in terms of the health insurance company. So the opportunity is huge right now for private sector participation in healthcare. Thank you.
Africa.
Tony, I just want to quickly chip in something before going back to you. And I want to ask Nigerians that are here, or maybe West Africans that are where if they know where the largest cancer center in West Africa, where it's located, if they have an idea where it's located, the largest cancer radiotherapy center in West Africa. Does anyone know?
I don't know.
Aha. So the largest cancer center was recently commissioned in Lagos, Nigeria, in LUTH. LUTH is a government hospital. It's owned by the federal government, Lagos University Teaching Hospital. But the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, led by Mr. Uche Oji, they invested $11 million in constructing a cancer center. It's the largest in Africa. So LUTH presents the market, and they built the facility. And so Mr. Uche Oji, who heads NSIA, he said when he was speaking with the president of Nigeria and the chief of staff, they asked him, this facility that you're going to build is going to be too expensive. The poor are not going to be able to afford it. He said, that's not his problem. You guys fix that. Fix that by fixing the reforms, health insurance and things like that. There are people that are going to Ghana, that are going to Côte d'Ivoire to access this care. So let's make it available. So I'm just giving that as an example of PPPs that are going on in Nigeria. In Abuja, a quaternary hospital is being currently envisaged for Abuja. Thank you.
Dr. Nee.
Yeah, so in terms of healthcare resources and the diaspora, healthcare professionals, we know there's so many Nigerians there in the US, doctors, nurses, in the UK, in Canada, and across the world. Considering the human capital back home, so we're trying to create a platform whereby Nigerians in the diaspora, healthcare, can contribute. So there's so many, it's critical in terms of capacity building. Part of what we do back home is that we work with, I talked about our offline engagement, we work with a lot of healthcare association, doctor association, radiologists, cardiologists, etc., in terms of their events. So we're looking for ways whereby Nigerians in diaspora can connect with those back home and support them in terms of capacity building and training. We think this is really important in terms of moving healthcare forward in Nigeria. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Let me chip in something quickly.
Yes.
So in across, and I'll try and make this really quick. Across Africa, there is a transitioning in disease burden. So previously in Africa, you will talk mainly about malaria, you will talk mainly about tuberculosis and other infectious diseases. But due to a couple of reasons, and I see this as an opportunity again for people that are interested in healthcare and want to invest in Africa. So there's a transitioning from non-communicable diseases, which is stuff like malaria, TB, and things like that, to non-communicable like hypertension. So there are more people are suffering from hypertension in Africa, like diabetes. More people are suffering from diabetes in Africa, and like cancers, more people are suffering from cancers in Africa. People adduce this. People say it's because of our change in diet, westernization of our diet. People say again it's because of rural to urban migration. Some people say it's because we're growing older. and fertility is increasing and mortality is decreasing. But again, clearly there's a transitioning in disease pattern, and this is also an opportunity to be able to tackle these diseases, because most of these diseases are chronic diseases. Hypertension, diabetes, cancers, and things like that. They require drugs, they require various kinds of management, and it's an opportunity for people that want to invest in healthcare in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you.